Hiya, Amy here with Amy's Wares, and I have a fun and simple card to share today using the smoosh technique with some heat embossing. So to start, I'm going to show you the products that I use today. I have some premium watercolor paper from Arteza and some stitched rectangle dies from Paper Rose. I did take A2 size panels and then cut them down with those dies to make them a little bit smaller than a standard A2 size. And that is a cute stamp set from Studio Calico. I am a Michigan native, so when I saw this stamp set, I just had to have it, and this is my first time using it today. So it comes in a really cute reusable envelope, which is just a little added bonus. But I'm just taking out that clear stamp and setting it up right in my MISTI on this already stitched edge die cut panel of watercolor paper. And I'm going to use my static powder bag because I am going to heat emboss this, and I don't want any stray flecks of embossing powder where I don't want it. So I'm using this anti-static powder bag a couple times, and then I have some Versamark clear sticky embossing ink. So this is what I'm going to use to lay down the embossing powder and then heat it up with a heat tool. So I'm using my little fancy press tool from Tailored Expressions, and I do stamp it a couple times because that watercolor paper really has a nice texture on it, has a really big tooth to it. Big tooth. What am I talking about, a narwhal? Anyway, so I did it twice. I could still barely see it, but I had faith that it was there. It was a good quality stamp. And I'm using some Brutus Monroe Alabaster White embossing powder. So I'm just going to coat that, kind of flick off the excess. I take a little paintbrush to kind of get some residual on there that went where it wasn't supposed to go. Just kind of carefully brush that off. And then I get my heat tool nice and hot and then melt that embossing powder right on the watercolor paper. Now the watercolor paper is a nice cream color. The embossing powder is pretty bright white, so there is a little bit of a contrast there. You can see it a little bit better once I cook it, but the magic will really be when I start introducing the ink. So get that all melted and ready to go. And then I have 4 different little Distress mini ink cubes, and I'm just smooshing those down right onto my glass mat. This is a Tim Holtz glass crafting mat, and I have some spray. Well, I'm throwing it evidently. So I have some spray. It's just water, but I did mix it with some Perfect Pearls in this little spray bottle, and that gives it a nice little shimmer and a little something extra to it. So as you can see, I just kind of activated that ink, which is water reactive, with the water and Perfect Pearls, and now I'm just smooshing the watercolor paper right down into it. Now, distress inks are a dye, whereas oxides are a hybrid. The oxides will kind of layer on top of each other a little bit differently just because they are a different sort of ink, but the dyes aren't really meant to do that. They'll just kind of soak into the paper. So if you want to have some differentiation, then you do want to kind of dry it in layers as you go, depending on the look that you're going for. So I'm just kind of working through the different colors that I chose, laying down various little splotches of color. Then I decide I want more of the dark blue, so I lay down more of the chipped sapphire, kind of add that to it, but I want to dry it up a little bit first because I don't want it to all blend together. I don't want it to be just one uniform color. That's the beauty and the fun of the smooshing technique, is really just getting all those different colors and little splatters and things like that. So just kind of working my way through the process, getting it to the point where it looks the way I want it to. And then at this point I decide, well, it's the home of the Great Lakes, so I think I need to introduce more blue and green. So you'll see I'll kind of smoosh down more of that ink in a moment, and then I kind of want to build that around the scene to kind of look more like the lakes, because we are surrounded by them. So go ahead and do that and get more of that nice peacock feathers, and then some of the cracked pistachio. And again, just smooshing that. That I did a lot more water, so you can see it's much more blended, and I don't know if you can see it in the light. There's a lot of shimmer to that bit. So I really liked how that looked. So I just kind of dried it back a little bit, maybe added a couple more layers. And I knew I wanted to add more detail, and I really needed to make the lower and upper peninsula really stand out from the card. So I didn't really have a plan in mind. I was just playing it by ear like I usually do. So I'm just drying it back and then deciding at, what way I'm going to get the state to stand out from the card. So that's how it looks with just the smooshing. I really love the texture of that watercolor paper. At this point, I decide to bust out my Arteza colored pencils. Now these are really high quality for the price. So I have my little swatch sheet, and I'm just kind of looking at what colors kind of match what I've already created. So I decide on that purple and fuchsia color, kind of start coloring it in, and I'm basically just really wanting the mitten and the upper peninsula to just kind of pop off the page a little bit. I want there to be some contrast there. So I'm just taking that deep purple color and just kind of going just very light-handed right along the edge of the embossing, just to kind of separate it and darken it up a little bit. At first I thought I would be able to get away with just the purple and pink, but then I realized there was too much of that pretty teal color within the state itself. So I did go back and grab one that was similar to the peacock feathers. So again, you'll see I'm just kind of lightly coloring in here, going into the top part where there's more blue, just kind of helping it to stand out from the page a little bit. So I'm actually from the Mitten State, and if you have talked to someone from Michigan, they may show you their hand and point to a spot on their hand to indicate where on the mitten they're from. So I am from West Michigan, so I have been known to use my hand to show people on a map where we live. That's kind of how we roll. But the stamp set was just so cute, and being a Michigan native, I had to get it. So pretty much just finishing this up here, coloring in, making it pop out. You can already see it looks a lot more clear on the background than it did initially. And then I will go in once I'm done with this, and I grab some Wink of Stella. The name slipped my mind for a moment, but the Wink of Stella that I have is just an additional, amount of shimmer. And here I'm wiping off just in case there was any excess of the ink that got on the embossing. Typically, the embossing is going to resist the ink. That's the beauty of the technique, but I just wanted to wipe it off in case there was any residual. So I'm adding it onto an A2 size card base of 110 pound cardstock. I use some Scotch foam tape here, just kind of cutting it in strips. I am very generous with the amount that I'm using here. Because it is watercolor paper, it is going to be a little bit more prone to warpage. So kind of really doling out the foam tape here. That, and I want it to be nice, even dimension. If it goes in the mail, you don't want it to get saggy. Nobody wants saggy cards. Nobody wants them. So I kind of attach that and make sure that's straight, which is quite challenging to do when you're recording from above. It's challenging to keep your big old head out of there when you're trying to do that, let me tell you. But anyway, here's the Wink of Stella. Here we go. So this kind of did two things. Not only did it add more shimmer to the design, but it also kind of took any residual distress ink that was underneath it and kind of blended it more uniformly together. So I don't think it would have done much to the colored pencil itself, but the distress ink that was still under it, in parts where I didn't color, would still react to the water in that Wink of Stella pen. So it just kind of blended it together. And it needed some blingage. So I busted out my tray of blingage and got these pretty little white sequins. Dumped some of those in my little fancy dish and kind of splattered those around. There's not much to it. I didn't really want to do a sentiment. I considered, you know, doing something with love from Michigan or something like that, but not sure who I would send this to, and I really liked the look of it. I didn't really think it needed a sentiment, so we're gonna say it's just a note card. It's just a pretty note card with state on it. So there you have it. That's my card today. Not much to it. Fun little easy technique to use your inks and your colored pencils. Hope you enjoyed my card today. If you did, I'd love it if you subscribe to my channel. Please hit the thumbs up, and if you hit the bell, then you'll be notified next time I post a video, which is pretty often these days. So thanks for checking out my video. I really appreciate you watching. Have a great day.